So I will echo Jay, and thank you all for coming. I know it's early, 10:30. It has been raining like crazy. I had to change myself when I came here. So today I want to talk about reliability in general for Polkadot. And I know that's something like it has not been discussed that much in the past, how we can like collectively improve the reliability, and that's important because the trust that people put in Polkadot is very linked to what we can guarantee. It's not what we do, it's about what we can guarantee. So I am here only 9 months. So I have been listening to a lot of people. I'm trying to get an opinion of what Polkadot is doing well, what's not doing well. So that was quite a journey and a surprise to realize that there is so varied opinion about Polkadot. Some people are telling me, hey, it's super complicated. The technical stuff is great, but like to build a parachain is horribly complicated. In general, I think there is a lot of agreement that it's not that easy to build. And then on the technical side, like you hear everybody on the spectrum from, hey, Polkadot is so much better than any kind of L2, like they cannot even compete with us. And the other part of the spectrum, I am also talking to people that are telling, hey, it's so complicated, I hate it, I want to go somewhere else, where there is more like liquidity and more users. And like, for example, like, I just don't know what to think about this opinion. I think they are both true, but I don't know exactly where we are on the spectrum. And at the same time, there is a lot of innovation coming in, like, and just in 9 months, like, there have been two big ones. So one is Plazza, and the other one is Jam. I will talk a bit about them later. So with all of that, it has been quite complicated for me and for Parity to understand like what we could do such that you have a better life on top of Polkadot on one side, and on the other side, for people which are not yet in Polkadot, how we should communicate to them, what we should build such that when they join, or if they join, they will have a better experience. So, what's the vision? I think we have seen that all over the place. So in theory, Polkadot is a trustless, secure, scalable, reliable, cheap, and easy to use environment for building blockchains. Just for your information, nobody understands outside of the Web3 world what trustless means. So the word is not good because like people just don't understand what it means. I think the other ones, they get it. Where I think we are. So trustless, yes. Secure, mostly. Scalable, maybe. Reliable, kind of. Very cheap. And maybe not so complicated to use. I built some small application on top of Polkadot, and I find that a bit like, okay, it's a young technology, and like the documentation is not perfect, but it's not that complicated. Interesting. Maybe next one. Yes. Okay, so yesterday, Bjorn talked about the big events from last year, like the big landings, and Gav talked about the new Bright feature. I will just talk about what we want to do for the next 6 months. And for the next 6 months, the idea is like to improve a bit in every dimension such that we are more reliable and people can trust us more. So if you look at the graph, like the numbers are kind of arbitrary. What I want to show is in which direction I think we need to improve. So we need to improve on the security axis a bit. We need to improve on scalability a lot. And we need to improve in reliability a lot. I think we are especially weak there, and I think there are other areas where we are super good, like innovation or decentralization. So the first one is security. So the security of the chain itself is excellent. I don't understand fully like the economics, but like I trust Gav and the others to have made a good job there. But there are other things which are not that clear in terms of security. Security is a complicated thing. Like you could have a super secure system, but then if you configure it badly, for example, then you are not secure. So we want to focus on a few things, and I will explain the first one because I think it's important. So we want to remove unilateral access. Unilateral means one person alone should not be able to make changes to Polkadot. Like the runtime, the node, and all of these things, that should not be possible that one person alone does it. Because if we require 2 people, then you need a collusion between people to change something. And you have a lot less bad actors than what we think. But having one is possible. So one of the things I want to do is when we build the code and we push the code, it should not be possible for one person alone to do it. And that will minimize the risk. The second thing it has been touched on yesterday is all the dependency stuff. When you build the SDK, for example, you are pulling an army of crates. When you build Polkadot.js, it's the same thing. You are pulling like hundreds of packages, which are used by the system, but you didn't write the code. And even if it's secure at some point in time, there is no guarantee that next week it will be. So one of the things we need to do over time is to reduce the number of dependencies we have. Because there are so many, there is no way we can manually look at the code that all these people are doing. And there has been like recent examples of hacks that are coming from the dependencies. Your code is secure, but the dependencies are not. And that's super hard to control. We have way too many, so we need to shrink them down over time. And the first step for that would just be to organize and to get a clear view on what are our dependencies, and possibly have some policies such that we tell people, hey, starting now, we don't add to it. Adding a new dependency is bad. So you need to have a good reason for that. Reliability itself. So that's something funny, but there is not even a definition of what that means that Polkadot is reliable, or Kusama, for example. What does that mean, good enough? So yeah, I think that's something which is missing. When I'm talking to companies that want to join, they're asking these questions, like, hey, what is your SLO? What do you guarantee to people that want to run on top of Polkadot and Kusama? And I am a bit blank. I don't even have a definition. So I think we need 2 things. We need a definition, and it's not super complicated. And then after that, we need to enforce it. We have been discussing creating a new collective with Erin that would be working on the infrastructure, and I think that would be one of the first good things they could do is to provide an SLO. The SLO is important, not that much for us, but for people that want to join, because that's something they are used to. And I think for us, it would be also useful to get us out of, like, we are very good, and go into, let's measure what we do, and improve that over time if there is a need. Because I don't even know if we are good or not. Like, for example, the fact that Polkadot is working pretty well means that we are doing a good job at testing stuff on Kusama, but we don't really have a good way to control that. Like, we are kind of lucky. If you want an example, which I think is complicated, we push the runtime on-chain. So it's before you have the previous one, and then you have the new one. There is no progressive stuff. If we made a mistake, then we ooze the chain. Okay, we have not done that yet, but it's a super risky stuff. Second part for reliability is about breaking APIs, or the compatibility. That's another surprise for me. The whole system, the SDK, is optimized for parity developer velocity. So people are, and that's okay. If you ask the developers what they want, they will tell you, we don't want to have too many constraints, and when we have dead code or compatibility that's complicated to manage, we don't want that. But if you ask the users, they want the reverse. They want maximum stability, because every time you change something, they are not happy with it. So again, here we need kind of a compromise somewhere. We want to keep some velocity, because you also want new features. And the more stable we are, like the less features are coming in. And on the other side, we need to be more stable. Again, there is no good definition of what people want. At the Parachain Summit 2 days ago, we discussed a bit like what would be the ideal. How long does that mean you want to be stable? So I think later this year, we will make a survey and ask people what they think are the good compromise there, because there is no like definite answers. The testing of Polkadot is also not like maybe at the level of quality where I would like it to be. And I think there is a lot of improvements there. For example, what does that mean that Polkadot is working? Does that mean the relay chain is working? Does that mean that all the parachains are working? Most of the parachains? When do we think we have been doing a good job? And that's important because in the future, the application will compose like multiple parachains at the same time. So for them, it will work when all the parachains are working. But so far, there is not a lot of control. And when you push things out, like we are not, for example, checking if all the parachains are working. And they should be. And we should roll back or do something if they are not. So that's linked to the rollout issue. How do we do rollout? So rollout is after you have built a runtime, push a runtime out. How do we control that? How do we make sure that we don't crash things? So all these things are typical reliability topics, and we need to make some small improvements there because we are not at the level of maturity that new customers expect. I'm not telling it's bad. I'm just telling because we don't have the numbers and the data to prove to others that we are good, people are not joining. So scalability is also interesting. On one side, you hear people telling, hey, we are so fast already that we could absorb all the transactions from Ethereum easily. And on the other side, you hear people telling companies from the Web2 world, like, hey, I want 1 million transactions per second just to start to make a prototype with you. They are not talking in thousands of transactions per second. So yes, we are good, but we are not yet good for the Web2 use cases. And we will need to go there like step by step. So the first step is to deliver elastic scaling, and this is on the roadmap for H2, so it should be done. But then after that, very likely, even the customer we have now, they are pushing what one core could do to the limit. So we will need to improve the one core performance and work more on the scaling of stuff. So for example, that could be optimistic scaling, that could be also like explaining to customer like when they can read the block, because most of them, for example, they could take the block after it has been produced by the collator, and they don't need for the relay chain to validate. So there are plenty of subtleties that we need to explain better, and that will help to scale the system. I think that's one of the areas we are very good at. So usability. Here it's a bit more complicated, and it depends what you want to build. So if customers or builders are like Rust and TypeScript orientated, I think we have an offer for them. It's not perfect, but there is some tools you can use. If you want to build on mobile, for example, there is a lot less like libraries available. So Nova has one, but I think we have been thinking too much about web apps. There is a lot of applications normally which are not web apps. There is a lot of people that want to build native apps, but there are also people they want to build application, or they want to connect to the chain from what they have. And when you talk to people about what they have large C++ application, or they have large Java application, and they're asking you, hey, do you have a SDK in Java to connect to your stuff? And we don't. And because we don't have an SDK, a lot of people don't even look at us. So one of the trends, I think, is in the future, we should think that the world is super large, and they are not only building web apps. So we will try to provide stuff which are working with more languages over time. Another surprise is the chain is nice. You can see all the state, all the data which is there. Cool. But at the same time, the way we store the state is complicated. And reading the data in the state is difficult. And I think that's something people should not have to do. Like typically, if you want your staking history, it's a nightmare to extract that from the state. There should be TypeScript library or whatever, and you pass it an address, and it gives you your staking history. Who needs to know that there has been 2 staking pallets, and that it has changed over time, and that it is spread in the chain in a complicated way? Yes, sure, if you are an expert in staking, you want to know, but most people don't want. If you are building a wallet, you just want to display the staking history, and you expect the API to provide you an interface per address, not per network. So the way the API is designed is not like super convenient to use, and I think it exposes too much data from the chain that you don't really need to know. You could check it, of course, but like most people don't need that. So it would help a lot to have a level of abstraction there. And that will be also good for us, because when we release a runtime, we could check that this API is working in a way that it is not breaking the customers. It's much easier to do than to do it at the state level, because we don't know how you are reading the state. And because we didn't explain that, of course, people are doing various kind of stuff, reverse engineering how the state is stored and whatever. And at the end of the day, that explains also why we are breaking people when we do changes, even because we don't really understand how they use the state. But normally, they should not know. If you think about traditional application, like model view controller kind of stuff. That's the job of the model, to hide how the state is stored. And there is a reason for that. It isolates the component, and it allows you to make changes without breaking the whole stuff. The other thing we are trying to do is called the omninode. And the omninode is here such that in the near future, it should be easier when you build a parachain. You don't need to have your own infrastructure, and the omninode will be integrated with all the partners inside the ecosystem. So you just need to write the palette, and like the other part of the ecosystem are done by the omninode. We are designing the omninode now. There is a post on the forum. If you want to look at it and like contribute to the specification, we are super interested to get feedback from you to understand like better how we can help. And of course, after that, that will be 2025. And depending on the result of this initiative in 24, we will see what we do exactly. OK, so the next big thing is Plazza. Oh, big. I don't know if it's big, but I think it's important. So the idea is Asset Hub holds all the assets. And because it's a system parachain, you pay in DOT. If we had EVM support there, it would be much, much easier to build application on top of Polkadot because you don't need to know about XCM. And that looks very much like a L2. So that's something people are used to. And I think it is important, not for the people which are currently in Polkadot, but for the people who are thinking about joining. We could build an environment which is very close to what they are used to and which is much easier to use. So that's kind of a bet if it will work or not. So the idea is to attract more customers, and at the same time, it's putting some stress over like the current ecosystem. So I don't know how it will go. But I know that if we don't change the strategy and we don't try to have like offers which are easier to use, it will be complicated to get more customers. And we need more customers from the outside. So there is a referenda out to understand if you want to have Asset Hub plus EVM. On top of that, Robert Aubert like had this idea, made a post about what he calls the Plazza, which is Asset Hub plus EVM plus some features which are currently on the relay chain. For example, there is no good reason that the staking stuff is on the relay chain and it needs to move out and it needs to go somewhere. So possibly it could go on top of Asset Hub, and that would again simplify the integration for like the common use cases. Can we build this thing in a way it is better than a L2 on Ethereum? I don't know yet. There is some direction which are going pretty well, and I think the technical stack is likely to be good. Is it enough? I don't think so. I think what is important for an EVM solution is integration, quality of the integration. How do you bridge things? What is the documentation? Having a marketing approach and whatever. And all this part will not be done by Parity because Parity doesn't have any kind of like resources to do that. The only thing we can do is to build an excellent technical thing. So we will need you all like to make this thing work in the future. Okay, Jam. So Gav presented Jam a few times, and it has been, on one side, people are super excited because it's new thing. We have a roadmap, and we have a next step. But as always, every time you have a change, people are anxious about the migration. What will happen between now and Jam? And when we build Jam, and when Jam goes live, how is my life as a parachain? And I understand I hate the big migration too. It's a risky stuff. But one of the things I want to do, because I think it's true, is Parity will support the parachain for a super, super long time. And if you want at least one good reason for that, is we own a bunch of like system parachain, and we need this system parachain to continue to work. So we will support the parachain for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, like the time you need. And if Jam is absolutely great, and everybody migrate to Jam in the future, then we don't need the parachain, and we will turn it off. But maybe Jam is great, and at the same time, you don't need the feature it provides, and then people will just stay where they are. And if we keep like customers on parachain, we will just continue to keep the stack. It doesn't mean we will, for example, I don't know, invest heavily in the stack, but the stack will be supported and you will not have to migrate before you want to, or and even if you want to. So conclusion, I think like, even if it's not perfect, Polkadot is working like fairly well. It's something that could become great. And I think like my approach of building stuff, which is like step by step, I am less as a person thinking long term. I am more thinking like, small step after small step, and we increase the quality of the thing, like in all the direction, until we have a good product. Is also an efficient way to make progress. I will be available if you have questions. I am around for today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.